This video will contain discussions of the words shown on screen. It will also spoil a significant portion of Mouthwashing, but to be fair, the game has been out for like a couple months at this point, so that's kind of not my responsibility. I don't think there's been a fandom more infamous in recent memory than Mouthwashing. Sure, you've got your Dream SMPs, Has-Been Hotels, I'm drawing a blank on the third one. Is Toxic Fandom Lost Media? Stay tuned for my 10-hour video essay that could be summed up in a couple of sentences on that. But I don't think we've seen a fandom blow up and burn out as quickly as Mouthwashing did. In its prime, literally every Let's Player was hopping on the Mouthwashing train. There was so much art, cosplayers, and even fan-made songs, although I can't comment on how good these songs were.
I'm the captain. My name is Captain Curly, 'cause I'm the captain.
Same guy who did the My Name is David, Dad, I Want Some Ice Cream David, by the way. If you haven't listened to the 15-minute masterpiece that is An Under's Tale, I implore you to. It's a really good listen. Since some time has passed and the dust has settled, I wanted to revisit the hell that was going on during the span of Mouthwashing's popularity. Because as I said, it was a real going down, even getting voted the worst fandom of 2024 by 17,000 people. I don't think that what happened with the Mouthwashing fandom is particularly unique. In fact, I think a lot worse happens in a lot bigger fandoms. The issue is, Mouthwashing fans were very loud about it. Loud enough to garner this reputation. Some disclaimers I want to make before we get into the video. A lot of the evidence that I'm using for this is art people have made, art that will be credited, but this is by no means a hit list for you to go out and harass the people that had made this art. If you genuinely think that being mean to someone on the internet is a productive way to change their mind or make them atone for some sin, then you are incredibly stupid and should probably get off the internet for everybody else's sake. Also, I'd just like to shout out my awesome cosplay that I made. Well, obviously not the boiler suit. The boiler suit was like 20 Great British pounds, and it is way too big for me. I don't know if you can see that. All the reviews were like, buy 3 sizes up because it's way too big, so I brought 2 up because I didn't trust them. And it's still massive on me, but for some reason the legs don't scale. So it's actually kind of small on my legs, but insanely big on the top half, and I'm also dying of how hot it is to wear this. Also, I'm aware that my badge is kind of shittily put together. It's actually homemade. I did it myself with what limited resources I had available. So what is mouthwashing? I say that like it's a hard question to answer. I should probably get back to philosophy videos. Well, Mouthwashing is a real flash-in-the-pan game. It came from a somewhat unknown Swedish studio called Wrong Organ. They only had one other game under their belt, How Fish Is Made, when Mouthwashing came out. Though received to high reviews, How Fish Is Made went relatively under the nose of the mass majority of gamers. I did talk about this in my original Mouthwashing video, but I actually played How Fish Is Made before Mouthwashing came out because Jacob Geller told me to. Praise be the video essayist deity. Also pull up the picture of the Chudjack pointing to the graph, and it's like, this is when I liked it, early adopter, and this is when you liked it, unwashed masses. HFIM also got an expansion called The Last One and Then Another. The expansion is strange, to say the least. Not saying that like How Fish Is Made wasn't esoteric in its narrative, but you roll around making your ball of rotted fish bigger, all Katamari style. Then you get jump scared by Curly from Mouthwashing, and then he asks you to add Mouthwashing to his wish list. There was a demo for Mouthwashing released in February of 2024 during one of Steam's million festivals that they hold, and the final game came out in late September of the same year. And it exploded to a size that indie games really don't reach unless they're Five Nights at Freddy's clone, targeted towards iPad kids, targeted towards clip farming streamers, or friend slop. I actually have such a clear memory of when it came out. I went down to my housemate who was trying to cook his dinner, and I wouldn't stop talking about how good the game was and how I wanted to make a video on it because I knew my demographic and I knew that it would probably do well. Go figure. Sorry, Jack, if you're watching. I hope the food tasted okay. So, real story, this is such a divergence after I just made the extended video essay joke, but I took a week off of literally everything to get that script out on time. This was midterm exam season, and I actually put off getting my degree to get that video out. Granted, I wasn't really focusing on my degree. The November university curse is painfully real. I was sitting in my bed playing Pokemon Fire Red on an emulator and watching the new season of Big Brother. God, that was an awful period of time. So the game released in late September of 2024, and I would say its peak of popularity was during October to January time, with the first big drop-off happening at the turn of the new year, and it never really recovered since. Now, there's a lot of factors for why a fandom can burn out this quickly. Our media moves insanely fast, faster than ever. People are adjusted to this and will just move on once they've gotten bored. It doesn't help that the survival of a media is now placed in the hands of algorithms, notably TikTok. A lot of people don't really seek out things anymore. They just wait until the algorithm brings it to them. And if people stop posting about mouthwashing and posting about other things, mouthwashing will be brought to less and less people, therefore the fandom stops growing, and people eventually lose interest. The game itself is a single narrative, and it's only about 2 hours of content for people to dig their teeth into. There's a lot to talk about, but it's also limited by its length, and also by the lack of variety in gameplay. It doesn't really have a replay value. That's not a critique, don't get me wrong, I'm just saying that people will run out of things to talk about. Just recorded a whole segment of that and realized it wasn't recording on OBS. But of course, one of the biggest reasons that the mouthwashing fandom died so quickly was because of the fans themselves. And God, did they do a lot of bad stuff. And to understand why the fandom had such an awful impact on the game's legacy, I really hate to do this, especially since I made a point against doing this in my first video, but I will do an incredibly short recap on the lore of mouthwashing, since a lot of the story is very important to understanding how badly the fanbase handled the game. So, in record speed, there's 5 characters on a spaceship that hauls mouthwash from one planet to another. These characters being Curly the captain, and his name is Captain Curly.
My name is Captain Curly.
Jimmy the co-captain, Anya the medic, Daisuke the intern, and Swansea the mechanic. The journey takes an incredibly long time, and the company that runs it is not the most ethical. They find out that once they arrive, they'll all be laid off and they'll lose their jobs. Jimmy then crashes the ship into an asteroid in a spit of rage. The rest of the game then follows the crew post-crash. With Curly being completely disabled, Jimmy takes over, and we see how the crew react as supplies start to dwindle and they realize that rescue isn't coming. One by one, the characters die. Some by suicide, others get killed. It really goes to shit. And this is all interspliced by some abstract Lynchian sequences that really make this game something special. It's phenomenal, and if you haven't played it, I highly would recommend you do. There's a lot that I didn't say here. That's a very brief overview of the story. It's incredibly depressing, and a lot of deep insight into some of the worst aspects of our society, like capitalism, the patriarchy, and the levels of corruption a person can fall to whilst following a dream. It's a heavy story, but as you can assume, the internet didn't treat it like that, and it didn't treat it with the respect that it deserved. And there's no better example of this than how the fandom handled the characters of mouthwashing. There is not a single character that wasn't mischaracterized by the majority of the fandom. I think as a general overview for every character, they can be understood as a finger puppet. Characters would often be looked at through this black and white lens of morality, and then reduced to purely that. And then they would be slipped onto the fingers of fans so they could play toys with them. Almost like straw manning, but instead of making an argument, you're exaggerating a character to the point of absurdity, making them 2D and flat. Characters got reduced to a shell of what they really were. I assume to make it easier to digest, or easier to turn into a funny TikTok to farm likes. It is almost like the fandom didn't want a psychological horror, They wanted a slice of life, and so they hijacked the premise and the characters to make their own slice of life, with blatant disregard to the source material. And there's no better way of displaying this than with Jimmy, the main character or protagonist of Mouthwashing. Do you count as a protagonist if you're a bad guy? Or is protagonist... Because protagonist is like the main character, but the main character is normally good. The pro-antagonist. Coin that. So, one of, if not the biggest plot threads in Mouthwashing is that Jimmy raped Anya. It's not told explicitly, and from watching other people play the game, a lot of people just didn't pick up on the subtext. But at some point before the events of the game, Jimmy raped Anya, and she's now pregnant with his child. One of the factors for why he may have crashed the ship. Once they landed, the authorities could hold him accountable for the rape that he committed. So to avoid this, he sentenced everyone to death. There's a lot more things to criticize Jimmy's character on other than him being a rapist, but you'd think that rape is a pretty damning crime enough to make most sane people to not treat Jimmy like he did nothing wrong. And look, I don't think it's a moral fault on you if you like characters that are rapists. I think you can like characters who have raped. I'm not doing some purity culture thing. There are phenomenally written characters who have committed rape. Griffith from Berserk is one of my favourite characters from any media ever. He's incredibly well written. Is he an awful piece of shit that should rot in the depths of hell? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't mean he isn't a great character from a purely writing perspective. Aside from Griffith, characters like Walter White from Breaking Bad, Negan from The Walking Dead, Glenn Quagmire from Family Guy, not a great written character, I'll admit, but I don't think you're evil for liking Glenn Quagmire. You can like characters that are bad, and you can like characters that have raped. You know what you shouldn't do? Treat them like they're a small little being who can't do anything wrong. Like, genuinely, people would, and I don't know if this is the right word, but infantilize him, almost to dumb him down, to take the edge off of his character and treat him harmless, I guess. To a lot of people, Jimmy was just this silly little guy that they could put fun filters over or make edits out of.
Top 10 reasons why Jimmy is sorry. Number 1. I'm just such a good guy.
Though fiction, he is a rapist. He raped his co-worker while she literally had nowhere to run or anybody to help her. If you cannot treat a story or its characters with the respect it deserves, then I highly recommend you don't post your opinions on the internet. If you do not have the maturity to discuss a fictional rapist without making him this innocent little guy, keep your mouth shut. I made the point that you can like bad characters for their good writing, but this is so clearly not what these people were doing, because nothing in the game would indicate to you that he is this small being. I really hate saying that, but I wrote it in the script like 5 times, and I will just say it. People ran with it because they liked it, not out of respect to the game, and not because their writing is good. They wanted an edgy, Tumblr sexy man, Jeff the Killer stand-in. It's nothing new, which feels absolutely awful to say. This is less of an issue, but a lot of people called him Jimbo to play into this silly, quirky persona he had donned. Actually, I was talking to Trashyark, the one who does the thumbnail art, for some of the videos on this channel. Go follow him on Instagram. He is genuinely one of the most talented people I know. And he did such a good impression of how these people acted. I'm just gonna read them out because this little chuddy, one of the most talented and funny people I know. Jimbo, I'm sorry you had to write about silly Jimbo. My apologies from the... My apology from the entire Mouthwashing fan base. No, it's okay. We call him Jimbo because it takes away from his evil actions. Heart emoticon. Absolute cinema. There was also this subset of people, far niche but still big enough to be an issue, that would headcanon him as gay. Do all the gay headcanoning you want. You know, maybe the Nameless King and Ornstein are toxic yaoi goals.
Yeah, we'll try this one. and I'll say it just once.
Go ahead.
Tell you what, we could have had a good life together. Fucking real good life. Had us a place of our own. But you didn't want it, Ennis. So what we got now is Brokeback Mountain.
But Jimmy is not gay for Curly. Do you want to know why I know this? Because he raped Anya. The thing that bothers me with this headcanon is, aware of it or not, claiming that Jimmy is a gay man actually detracts and misses one of the major parts of his character. This aspect of Jimmy is a commentary on the patriarchy, how misogyny breeds crime and rape culture, both inside and out of the workplace. By claiming he's gay, this whole insight is undermined. The critique of misogyny both as a societal evil and the means in which men enact their brutality and sexual desires onto women is lost. Because why would a gay man go out of his way to rape a woman? It takes away from Anya's rape by framing it in this absurd light. And I want to make it clear that I'm not making the claim that gay men can't be misogynistic. Look at James Somerton as a great example of this. But when you're making a commentary on how men use their position in society to exploit women, not just to fulfill their sex drive, but also as a way of reclaiming masculinity and establishing their power over another, to then claim that he did what he did because he was a closeted homosexual, it detracts from the whole remark, and it's homophobic, it's extremely homophobic, to state that a gay man would rape a woman out of self-hatred or to prove his straightness. Also, since I've seen this argument made, gay men can rape women. It has happened countless times in the past, and it will continue to happen. However, mouthwashing is a game, it's fiction, it's a piece of art that's trying to convey a message. Real-life events are not made by some grand overseer to make people reflect on its narrative. Nobody is saying that it's unrealistic. I didn't realize that behind me was just a pure white screen. That's probably really distracting. Nobody's saying that it's unrealistic that a gay man would rape a woman. They're saying that within the context of a story, it dilutes the argument that the game is making by headcanoning him as gay. I've also seen people make the counter-argument by saying, it's just a headcanon, it's not that deep. Let people interpret characters however they want. Well, if it's just a headcanon and not that deep, why do you feel so strongly about having it? Real question, why do you feel the need to headcanon him as a gay man? Because a lot of people defending it as not that deep kind of plays into the point that I was making earlier about how people want reduced versions of the characters they can play finger puppets with. And making him gay undermines the very real critique of misogyny that mouthwashing is making. And then on the complete flip side of this, there were other fans who treated Jimmy as if he were the boogeyman, like some evil supervillain that was going to come into your night if you even uttered his name. Real thing that happened, by the way, people would censor his name, typing J*MMY instead of calling him Jimmy or calling him Jimbala or Jimbo or any other J word. There's a big list, I think, on the Mouthwashing fandom of just names that people used instead of Jimmy. I think one of them was like Joust of Representatives, which is actually kind of peak. It was funny in the AOT fandom to call him like Reiner and Bomberclat, but wrap it up here. Now, I understand where these people are coming from, right? At least they aren't playing pretend like he isn't an awful person. But they're still making a joke out of rape. Doing this childish censoring of the name turns it into a light-hearted, oh, he's so bad, he's the one who must not be named. You're still downplaying what he did, just on the other end of the spectrum. Jimmy isn't a supervillain, he's just a man, and that's the point of his character. It doesn't take a Marvel-level bad guy to go out and commit the act that he did. Anybody can, and that's why the messaging is so powerful. It shows the reality of rape. The rapists are regular people. There isn't some gene that makes a person be born evil and capable of rape. Anybody is capable of rape. People like me and you. And that's the issue. This is the insight that mouthwashing is trying to convey. However, doing this over-the-top boogeyman shtick just dilutes it. It's unproductive at best and ignorant at worst to write him off as a, I don't know, Judge Holden level character. The path that leads him to rape Anya and crash the ship are incredibly common thoughts that people have. Not the actions, obviously I hope none of you watching have ever even considered doing that, but the motives, like shifting blame, running away from consequences, trying to take control of your life, not taking responsibility. As much as we don't like to admit it, these are things that most of us do. Jimmy is a cautionary tale of the level you can sink to by not taking responsibility. Almost like a fable, and sensationalizing his misdeeds, you lose the messaging Mouthwashing is pushing. There's a lot of really interesting takeaways you can get from Jimmy's character, but you won't get them if you can't even type out his name. There's a moth. I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, if the moth gets into the shot, then comment, "Moth in the shot, Unijoy, I hate you," or something along those lines. I don't know, I'm not gonna kill it, and I also don't want to get up to move it. The next natural character to discuss from here is Anya, and god do I have a lot to say. I've got about a million bones to pick with how Anya was treated, so let's just get right into the shitstorm. I think the biggest and most overarching point to start with Anya is with her sexualization by the fandom. This has like two different perspectives. Genuinely, I've seen people claim that the game sexualized Anya because she has a large chest. I don't know if you've stepped outside recently, but some women have big breasts. This isn't sexual. The idea that a woman's body is inherently sexual in nature is one of the greatest sins that humanity has committed. It's not even like she's showing skin, not that showing skin in itself is sexual, but more people would make the correlation to a greater extent if she was. She's completely covered, she just has boobs. And the worst part is that people think they're being woke or politically correct by being like, you can't sexualize rape victims in instances where she isn't being sexualized. They're just giving a mask-off take that they view the female form as an object of sexual desire, regardless of the context. Though I do view this as a product of overcorrection. What were they overcorrecting for? Well, do I need to answer that question? She's a woman in a piece of media. Of course she was actually sexualized to all hell. There is so much art of Anya that is straight up porn. She is a rape victim who killed herself because of what she went through. And your first thought is, yeah, but she's got a nice rack though. The idea of sexualizing a rape victim is disgusting enough, but it also doesn't entirely matter that she was a rape victim. Stay with me, that sounded a lot worse than it did in my head. The fact that a woman cannot exist within a piece of media without becoming someone's jack-off material is bad enough. Her being a victim just makes it that much worse. The worst cases of this can be found through the Jimmy x Anya ship. It's really part of this wave of people called dark shippers which, and I quote, usually involve pairings that are taboo in some way, such as incestuous, paedophilic, and or physically abusive. It is also used to describe ships that do not align with canonical sexuality, whether actually canonical or insisted by widespread fanon. Lolly and Shota pairings may also be categorized as dark ships. The term differs from comship to some fans, as comship implies a complicated relationship, while darkship is for taboo, aka dark relationships, i.e. dark ships are under the umbrella of comships, but only a small portion of comships are dark ships. Do I think this is a flat out bad thing? Emotionally, yes, I think these people will rot in hell, but I don't think these people should be stopped for doing such. As fucked up as it is, there's a lot you can delve into with a fucked up relationship. For example, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, a book I haven't read and have no interest in reading. However, I hear that it handles the themes of paedophilia well. Almost like a grim examination of Humbert's psyche, the main guy who's also a nonce. Again, I haven't read the book, so my point could be void. But I think for people who've gone through stuff like sexual assault or have been the target of an incestuous dynamic, Understanding it through media, in this case shipping fandoms, could help them tackle and face what they went through, since they're a degree removed. I don't know if that has any psychological backing whatsoever. Yet, on the other hand, I do think there's a lot of fucked up people out there that just have this as a kink because they're into some fucked up stuff. And they use this guise of dark shipping as a shield against the fetishization of rape and sexual assault. I don't know how on earth you would manage to draw a distinction between the two, but maybe, as a blanket statement, instead of making TikToks about it, you just keep it to yourself. Also, don't know where to put this in, so I'm throwing it in here. There's an incredibly infamous piece of art someone drew of Anya playing peekaboo with her dead baby. I have no idea what the artist was going for here. Maybe it was showing that Anya would have loved her rapist baby, even if it died, or that she would get it aborted and regret it. Not sure how accurate that would be, considering only 32% of pregnant rape victims decide to keep the baby. Or maybe it was some strange pro-life statement. I wouldn't be surprised, since when looking for the art, I found it on the pro-life subreddit. Since I had to read through some of those comments, you have to hear them too, since this is not my burden to bear alone. She unalived herself by ODing because of a multitude of factors, but a good chunk of it that she was trapped in a crash ship with her rapist, with little chance of rescue. The game is called Mouthwash, and from what I hear, it's good, so I don't want to spoil it too much. I always thought of Anya as pro-life. Lovely art. You cannot tell me she would love her baby any less for what their father did. Statistically, that baby would be gone, so maybe keep that in mind when you're headcanoning people as pro-life. I also feel like it's worth noting in the mischaracterization segment of the video, for the character that was raped, I've had to spend the majority of time not even talking about her character, but her body and what people did with it. I also took massive issue with Anya's character being reduced purely down to she was raped. I said this in my original mouthwashing video all the way back in November. And this isn't me being like, oh, listen to what I say, I'm such a prophet for how people will treat characters, nor am I trying to make it out that I'm holier than thou. It was pretty obvious that this was the direction the fandom would take it in. I'm gonna be 20 soon, and I've spent so much time on the internet, I know how people would react to characters that have been assaulted. In fairness though, I kind of get where these people were coming from. I don't think they're evil or something like that, since the game is mainly told through Jimmy's perspective, a man that does not have the slightest bit of respect for Anya. The most we see of her is through his eyes, him trying to deal with the consequences of the rape. With that said, we do see a lot more of Anya's character in the pre-crash flashbacks. For instance, she failed to get into medical school, yet Pony Express, the beacon of corporate morals that they are, allowed her to be the only medic on a year-long voyage. There's a lot to talk about, but it's overshadowed by her assault. She was also quite excited and bubbly during the Curly birthday flashback. Yet this was rarely expressed in fan discussion of the game. Also the line, "Our worst moments don't make us monsters," and how she has to cope with that as she sees everyone around her slowly lose their minds. It's such a disservice to reduce her down to she was raped. There's really two characters that don the name Curly. There's pre-crash Curly and post-crash Curly. They're one person, but are treated completely different by the fandom. A lot of what I've seen of the understanding of Curly's character is this compassionate but conflicted character, trying to hold the group together as the dad-type figure. It's a natural assumption to make, as that is how he's presented on the Tulpa. He is the captain, and his name is Captain Curly. I actually had to hold back from shoehorning that bit in any more than I already have. I love that song. I don't care if it's a tonal jump scare. This sometimes paints him in a light as another victim to Jimmy's actions, almost as if he was blindsided by his close friend. But Curly knew about the rape Jimmy committed, and he did nothing. He isn't the dad of the group, nor is he a conflicted soul trying to do the best for everyone. Through pure reckless and his inaction, it ultimately caused the crash. The crash was Jimmy's doing, but Curly paved the way. He is just as caught up in Jimmy's misdeeds as the man himself. If anything, Curly was an enabler of Jimmy's actions. By not doing something to stop his awful treatment of Anya, he let this happen. Rape isn't just something that people wake up and do one day. It's a product of a patriarchal culture and a vicious hatred towards women. By Curly not calling Jimmy out on how degradingly he spoke and acted towards Anya, he let the situation boil to its breaking point. As everybody in Mouthwashing, his character isn't as black and white as I've made it out. Curly has his reasoning for why he acted in this way. He and Jimmy were good friends, and like it or not, when this thing happens in the real world, it isn't often as clear-cut as when it happens on the internet. These are incredibly messy situations that can really only be taken on a case-by-case basis. Believe victims when they come out with their stories. However, it isn't as simple as, here's the baby for proof, time to put an axe in the perpetrator's head. And I think a thing that not a lot of people keep in mind is that they're on a spaceship. Like, what is Curly realistically gonna do? Ultimately, Curly wants to see the good in every person, even Jimmy, and even when he found out what Jimmy had done. And him losing control over his body after the crash is punishment for this. He had to watch everyone on board go insane while he's unable to stop it. Not that him being disabled was a punishment. I want to make it clear that disability isn't a punishment. It's more of a symbolic thing. Him being in a position where all he can do is watch this situation he could have stopped happen. And whilst we're on the topic, we might as well discuss post-crash Curly. So the fandom also infantilized him to no end because of his disability, and sort of washed him of all guilt for not stopping Jimmy. This isn't a point I came up with, but it's one I've seen disabled people talk about in their day-to-day lives. But able-bodied people interact with disabled people with the presumption that they cannot function by themselves. This goes for both physically and mentally disabled people. It's something that I've actually experienced myself, but obviously to a much lesser degree. As soon as someone finds out you're disabled, it's almost like this switch is flipped in their brain, where they start treating you like a parent looking after a shy toddler. And you can see this in action with the way people discuss post-crash Curly. I guess it does come from a good place, a completely misguided and uneducated place, but at least it's not a malicious one. Able-bodied or minded people feel like it's their responsibility to help those who they've deemed worse off. Like, oh, I'd save Curly and I'd feed him all the painkillers he needs. And I'm sure there are some full altruistic people out there who believe this, but it comes off as, you are lesser than me, here's my help. And they get some social gratification for stooping to the level of interacting with a disabled person because they're just so saintly. This is slightly off topic, but there's an alarmingly large sect of people who have a fetish for paraplegic, limbless individuals. It's like a really strange power thing from what I understand. You know that one image of the anime girl who's all hooked up to machines in a hospital bed and she has no limbs? I've no source for this, but I'm 95% sure that it's fetish art. It's called acrotomophilia, and you can guess that there's people out there that have a field day with Curly. I'm not showing this for obvious reasons, but it's out there. But also the commentary Mouthwashing is making on disability and how people with disabilities are often objectified or defined by their disability or treated like lesser than is probably lost on these people. Admittedly, I have a lot less to talk about when it comes to Swansea and Daisuke, when compared with the other three characters, so I've lumped them together into one congealed subsection. Maybe I just didn't see the brunt of it, but I don't think either of them were done nearly as badly as Jimmy, Anya, and Curly. I saw someone on Twitter say that Daisuke was a litmus test to see if the internet was ready to act normally about an Asian male character, and that answer was a resounding no. Daisuke was the target of a lot of sexualization. To be fair, a lot of the characters were, nearly all of them, but I think really the biggest targets were Anya and Daisuke. He, like many others, was also infantilized, treated like a child compared to the rest of the crew. He got that Jimmy Small Bean treatment, but if you play the game, he's just a guy that's happy a lot of the time. I do think this is in part to him being Asian. Being emasculated or treated like a child is something that I've seen a lot of Asian men complain about. I believe it's to do with Asian people having softer features when compared to white people, or at least that's where the stereotype derives from. I mean, can you think of any, like, alpha Chad Asian men outside of anime and Asian cinema? Like, white people have Arnold Schwarzenegger last name, Chuck Norris, Clint Eastwood. Black people have Terry Crews, Samuel L. Jackson, Shaquille O'Neal, but what do Asian men have in this regard? The closest I think they've gotten is Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee, but even then, in the films I've seen them in, it's often wrapped up in this very orientalist, like, wise martial artist. Or it'll be like, you think this Chinese guy can't fight? Well, think again. Granted, I haven't seen many of their films, so I could be completely off base. I'm trying to think of, like, another example. Yukio Mishima, maybe? Like the Japanese fascist guy? But he's not even a character, he's the real guy, except for in that one film. Actually, Senor Chang from Community, he's probably the coolest person ever.
Buenos dias, children. You'll be happy to know you made it all the way till the end.
You're not even a student!
Wrong! Critical media literacy and politics of gender, biatch.
Also, another thing that people got wrong is that Daisuke has a darker skin tone. I can't find a canon ethnicity or nationality from him, aside from the devs saying that he was based off of Ryosuke Kawashima from the Japanese film Cairo or Pulse. I've always assumed he was Filipino, Pacific Islander, that sort of region. The point is that he has darker skin. There was this sect of mouthwashing artists who began whitewashing Daisuke in their art, to the extent that this meme was made, obviously in reference to that awful Joe Biden comic strip that was circulating around the same time. Obviously, looking at me, I'm not a tanned Asian, and I cannot speak for the Filipino or Pacific Islander community, but I am very aware that the idea of having lighter toned or fair skin is desirable, at least to conventional beauty standards. And that's a real issue that people in those countries face. Korean whitening or brightening cream is a real thing that people use to try and look more attractive, which is a deeply horrifying thing to be pervading into culture. Just taking this from Wikipedia, since I don't have the time to look into skin whitening, but in a number of African countries, between 25 and 80% of women regularly use skin whitening products. In Asia, this number is around 40%. In India, over 50% of skincare product sales are attributed to skin lightening formulations. Not great. And then for Swansea, just wanted to mention that everyone doing Let's Play gave him pretty much the same voice of like American Italian, and none of these were the Swansea accent. This is blatant anti-Welsh racism and erasure that I will not stand for. Oh, but wouldn't it be weird to name a child after the city he's from? Don't care. Pull up the clip of Ali G interviewing Victoria Beckham.
So, what's he called?
Brooklyn.
All right, and how did you come up with that name?
Well, we found out that I was pregnant while I was on tour in America, and we was in Brooklyn when we found out.
So, had you actually done it there?
No, we didn't do it there.
Ah, for real?
We did it in Denmark, if you really want to know.
Swansea also became a sort of dad figure, the grumpy but lovable old guy in the group. Even though this is so far removed from his in-game depiction. This might be controversial, but I think Swansea was one of the most mischaracterized by the fandom. It's just that what he was mischaracterized as wasn't as dire as the small bean Jimbo. How many times do I fucking say small bean in this script? So it wasn't talked about as much. Throughout the game, Swansea is an asshole to those around him. He's a sad old drunk that takes out his problems on the rest of the world, which, now that I'm thinking about it, describes the average Swansea resident pretty accurately. He's flat out rude to Daisuke, and he's majorly depressed. His monologue before Jimmy caps him in the head is him outlining how he tried to fix his life after being an alcoholic, but realized none of his achievements ever felt that good, and that his drunken days were the best days of his life. Like Curly, for whatever reason, Swansea gets all of his misdeeds money laundered through one scene where he tries to kill Jimmy with an axe, which I'll admit, it is cathartic to watch. However, I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't believe if we ever actually hear if this is what Anya or Daisuke wanted. His intentions aren't made entirely clear. At the end of the day, who the crime was committed against, at the end of the day, Anya was who the crime was committed against, and so she should be the one to decide what was done, well, her and the court of law. Swansea becoming judge, jury, and executioner is just as a selfish act as the rest of his drunken life, since he's acting purely in self-interest. He thinks that Jimmy should die, and so he's gonna go through with it. I'm sure Anya and Daisuke and Curly want Jimmy dead, but there's a massive difference between wanting someone dead and actually following through. And it's not like Swansea is completely blameless here. It's not like he spawned on the ship post-hell breaking loose. He would have been there to see Jimmy being the worst person imaginable and how he acted towards Anya. And Daisuke would have been there for that matter. In fact, Daisuke sucks up to Jimmy for like half of the game. They are both grown men, but for their differing reasons the fandom doesn't like to focus on their wrongdoings. To talk more generally about fans not being able to conduct themselves in an appropriate manner online, one issue the Mouthwashing fandom had was rabid fans. If you didn't have the same opinion about a character, that was grounds to be attacked on. If you had a different interpretation, that was grounds to be attacked on. There was one case that I'll talk about a bit later, where an artist was hounded and sent death threats because they drew Anya promiscuously. Is that condemnable? Yeah, absolutely. But does it garner death threats? Unsurprisingly, no. It is getting so hot in this boiler suit. I want to open the window, but then there's going to be like 10 more moths, and they're all going to be in shot, and you're all going to comment, "I hate you, Unit Joy, kill those moths." And I'll say I don't have the heart to do it. You know that one is like, could you poke a tiger through the cage? And it's like, no, I don't think I could bring myself to do it. I just imagine I'm getting increasingly red, and it's really embarrassing. There was also a notable incident of a cosplayer dressing up as Anya to promote her OnlyFans. The creator made a couple of TikToks cosplaying as Anya that garnered a lot of popularity, particularly this one, which I believe has been taken down. She was recreating another video of Anya that was quite widespread at the time, partly because it was a well-made animation to a fun song, and partly because Jimmy gets a fire axe to the teeth. People took issue with this video initially for a pretty dumb reason in my opinion. People said that she was sexualizing Anya, even though she was recreating the popular dance. I can take a guess at why people thought she was sexualizing Anya, since the creator is quite gifted, let's say that. But is it sexualizing, or does the woman just have boobs? Like, that is just her body. Although, with all of the good faith I've just given her, the full video on Twitter shows her slowly removing articles of clothing. And, as I said, she did an OnlyFans shoot dressed as Anya, where she did what people do on OnlyFans. Get naked and perform acts that should probably be kept to the bedroom. Not showing this here for extremely obvious reasons. There was also this one promo video she did, where she added in text box from Mouthwashing, and roleplayed as Anya getting pent up on the ship, and saying how she's only human and has needs too, which is grossly sexualizing Anya. There was also this Hood AU, or Hood Alternate Universe, where all the characters were Hood, whatever the fuck that's meant to mean. I don't think this is as bad as the other things because I don't think it's spread very far, but it's still not great. I mean, it's a game containing a full white cast bar one person. I just think it's kind of stupid. I do think there's a point to be made about why this was made. You know, probably because it was funny, but why is it funny that you're putting characters in a black setting? Because the characters are white and using AAVE? Stay with me here, because I have no idea if this is a bit of a reach, but to me it's kind of like, or it reminds me of minstrel shows. You're putting a non-black cast of characters in exaggerated black stereotypes, and that's pretty much the whole joke. It's look at these white people doing black stereotypes. I'm not sure, but it rubs me the wrong way. As many bits of media do, Mouthwashing got its own unofficial theme song, or anthem I guess. You know how Metal Gear Solid is always posted to Invisible by Duran Duran? The song that's like, when you can't even
Say my name as the memories turn. Now you feel it now.
It's a really good song. It's such a good song, despite it never actually being in the series. Or like Judas by Lady Gaga and I Will Survive being Gojo's songs. Well, Mouthwashing got one, that being Headlock by Imogen Heap. Since TikTok is TikTok, the popularity of this song quickly spread from the Mouthwashing fandom directly to the wider internet, so what I'm about to talk about might not be actually Mouthwashing fans, but it's definitely been inflicted by them. So as Imogen Heap is getting this resurgence, someone decides to scroll half a decade back on her Twitter likes, I guess to find something cancelable, and they did. There was a tweet she had presumably liked saying only men can have penises and women have vaginas, and Twitter just ran with that as her being an open and out TERF, trans-exclusionary radical feminist, or just a general transphobe. On top of this, people accused her for being right-wing for following Donald Trump on Twitter. I know Twitter likes to run on shaky evidence, and this is a great example of this. For one, she's a public figure, and she probably has many people running her account. Also, it was almost half a decade ago, and people's views can change incredibly quickly. And I was very suspicious of the claim that Imogen Heap was a TERF, because if you don't know, Imogen Heap is British. And over here in Britain, people don't really give a shit about being transphobic. It's kind of the in thing at the moment, ever since J.K. Rowling hopped on the train. People aren't covert about it, they'll just say it. But in reality, it was probably just an accident. I mean, for a personal example, I listened to 4chan exports readings to go to sleep. Incredibly embarrassing, I know, but I've conditioned myself to get tired as soon as I hear T6's voice. While sleeping with my phone on, I've done some incredibly stupid shit by accident. Like, I recently just managed to subscribe myself to the Lex Friedman podcast. But fans pretty much hounded her until she came out and stated that no, she isn't a TERF. From all this, there arose a question that actually gained quite a bit of traction. Not one that was deep dived into, but rather a throwaway line to quote tweet some art that you don't like. The question being, should Mouthwashing have a fandom? This, to someone who is chronically online and is interested in seeing how people act online, is really interesting. I don't think there's ever been a case where people have outright stated that a piece of media shouldn't have a fandom. And I see where these people are coming from. The game's themes are incredibly heavy and touch on real aspects of real-life society, so having a fan base about said game feels a little bit off. So I disagree with the argument that Mouthwashing shouldn't have a fandom. I think it's practically impossible to stop a fandom from forming once it's in motion. There are fandoms for serial killers, school shooters. Think of the worst and most deprived thing you can, and there's probably a fandom for it. Should these exist? Absolutely not, but there's not really much you can do to get rid of them, so I find the statement slightly superfluous. But the real point I'm trying to make here, but the issue isn't that Mouthwashing has a fandom, but it's the way in which fandom culture operates as a whole, and how certain people online cannot tell when it's time to clock in and out of fandom brained. That's a term I'm coining, by the way. Take shipping, for example. Shipping happens in literally any fandom you can think of. If there's two characters, you can make them fall in love. If there's only one character, then you can make them fall in love with yourself. If there's no good matches for characters in their own content, then ship them with someone completely unrelated. Shipping is the gold standard for fandoms. Now, someone who is fandom-brained will come to Mouthwashing, play or watch someone play the game, enjoy it, and then join the fandom. This person hasn't put two and two together that this probably isn't the type of media in which you would interact with through the typical fandom means. And so they ship two characters that really shouldn't be shipped together, but they don't entirely see the problem since shipping exists in every other fandom. Even problematic ships are tolerated to a certain degree, like Vriska and Terezi after Vriska was incredibly psychologically and physically abusive to her, or Vriska and Aradia after Vriska was incredibly physically abusive towards her, or Vriska and Tavros after Vriska was incredibly sexually abusive to Maybe we should stop shipping Vriska with people. I think there can and should be a Mouthwashing fandom. I just don't think the general state of the internet is ready to live up to the task, so to speak. And I don't even think it's a media literacy problem that's the issue here, the buzzword that people love to throw around whenever fans are misbehaving. Because Mouthwashing isn't a very hard game to understand. Sure, there's a lot of commentary happening for you to sink your teeth into. But as a baseline, here's what's happening. It isn't very subtle. Honest to God, I think people are becoming extremely desensitized to heavy topics because of the language we've been using and how we handle discussions of it online. Language can influence and shape our— oh my god, I'm losing my voice rapidly. Language can influence and shape our understanding to a huge extent. So when we talk about something bad, like a young man being murdered with a gun, those words, murdered and gun, hit a primal place. There's a kick to them because of our cultural context. Now, if I were to tell you that this young man was unalived with a pew-pew, does this have the same impact as the previous statement? Or does it make me sound like a fucking idiot? Oh, Anya was raped and unalived. You can just say raped and suicide. I've said the word like 30 times in this video, and I can promise you I probably won't get demonetized. The CEO of YouTube isn't going to stand outside my house at night with a pew-pew to my head while he deletes my channel in front of my eyes. Just say the word because it's genuinely ruining us. And if you care more about the performance of your video or how much money you'll be able to squeeze out of your content than how much you care about real-life crimes that impact millions of people, then I'm sorry, you don't have the maturity to be talking about these subjects. A lot of this anger and discourse surrounding the handling of such a heavy game wasn't just directed at the fanbase, but sometimes the fanbase pointed these critiques at the developers of the game, Wrong Organ. Now, I must preface this, I am a human with my own biases, and as a fan of Wrong Organ, I am more lenient to give them the benefit of the doubt with their actions. They were and are still an incredibly small team. I believe there's only 8 people working for Wrong Organ, and they were very quickly thrust into the spotlight and surrounded by a pretty unhinged fanbase to say the least. I can see a lot of the missteps they took as appeasement for said fanbase, but at the end of the day they are still missteps, and should be discussed when covering a topic like this. A discussion brewed about Wrong Organ and how they handled their game outside of the narrative itself, claiming that Wrong Organ didn't take their game seriously. I think some of this criticism is unjust, like people saying that they should have taken an active role to stop people from misinterpreting the game or treating the contents of the game lightly. I do not think that's on Wrong Organ to do that. I cannot think of any other fandom that has expected the creator to basically police how people interact with their own media. I'm actually radically opposed to this, on the complete other side of the aisle. I think the artists and creatives should be fully hands-off with meaning, fan interpretations, all that stuff. I think it should be kept in their heads and never leave. Now, maybe this is because I'm a David Lynch, Hidetaka Miyazaki dick rider, but I've gotten so much more than having to sit down and brute force my way through a narrative and interpretations than just watching VatuVidya give me a rundown. Genuine advice to everyone watching at home: stop watching lore videos and give yourself the luxury of working out yourself. It's extremely fun and you won't come off as that meme that's like, me when I'm in an argument, but I can't remember any of the points from the 10-hour video essay I just watched. TLDR, it's not the job of the artist to make sure you're interpreting their work correctly. I guess the counter-argument to this would be that Mouthwashing is a very dark game, containing stuff like rape, and maybe there should be some input from the dev team to stop people from making a joke out of it. And I understand that, but the 2 people I've mentioned, Miyazaki and Mr. Lynch, God rest his soul, have both made media focused on incredibly dark subject matters. Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet both have rape scenes. I believe Wild at Heart deals with rape, although I haven't watched it yet. And in Dark Souls, Gwyn commits mass genocide against the ancient dragons, and Seath likes to kidnap women and perform human experiments on them. But the fandom doesn't really joke about this or take it lightly, except for the Gwyn genocide stuff actually, to be fair. An incident that springs to mind that people bring up as Wrong Organ condoning what the fanbase was doing with its characters was during the death threats of the artist I spoke about earlier. Wrong Organ put out a statement after the fan got death threats, basically saying if you don't like what someone is saying, then just block them and move on instead of harassing them, which is a fair enough point, and something I'd highly recommend you do. If someone annoys you, just block them. I love spending my time on Twitter because 95% of the lobotomites have been wiped out. What was that one thing that guy said? Like Joe Cuckold, I think his name was. Twitter is my weapon of justice, and the block button is my bullet. Some people took this as an endorsement to make distasteful art, or at the very least them saying it's fine to do so. But if you think about the context that prompted this tweet, I'm pretty sure you'd be able to figure out why they said this. Spoilers, it's to stop people from getting death threats online. But from this there was a whole other ordeal with Martin Halden, one of the developers for Mouthwashing. People then called out a double standard or a contradiction between words and actions when Martin Halden posted a picture of the streamer Asmongold with the caption, "The anti-woke crowd has found the game, and I feel sick to my fucking stomach. Being on Twitter is going to be unbelievably painful from now on, and I don't know if I can be active on here. I don't have the energy for this." When a commenter told him that Asmongold seemed pretty interested in the game, and maybe it's good for publicity even if the devs don't like the guy, Halden responded with, "Anti-woke means anti-gay, anti-me as a dev. I've seen that dance many times before. I do not want him playing it regardless of exposure because it's making me feel like absolute shit." A portion of people believe that he was wrong for making these comments. One, because it went against what Wrong Organ stated, and because they didn't like their favourite streamer being attacked for being anti-woke. Now, you can probably tell by looking at me, I don't really care about this drama. I think there's an extremely big difference between a random artist being sent death threats and a developer not wanting a streamer who said he didn't care about the current genocide going on in Palestine because, and I quote, "there are terrible people who come from an inferior culture."
Oh, I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. It's not even a question. These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture that is horrible. It kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways. It is that simple. No, I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel sorry for them. I don't care. I don't support them.
If you disagree with my take and would side with the man who used a dead rat as an alarm clock, using the stench of rotting flesh in the sun as a way of waking up, as well as wiping blood from his infected gums on his bedroom wall, and cannot drink water without chasing it down with a fizzy drink, then by all means, you're free to do so. Just keep in mind that that's the person you're taking political advice from. I've been making an active stride in my channel to be more positive this year. During its infancy, I would only talk about things I liked, in a hope to guide more people to peak media, and also give my opinions on things. However, if you cannot tell, I've been going through a bit of a rough patch, and since David Lynch died, nearly all of my videos have been negative. So, in the hopes of remedying this, I want to look at 1, why this all happened, and 2, ways we can stop this from happening in the future. I think there's a couple of reasons for why the fandom got so toxic. The lasting presence of COVID did a real number on people's ability to function as rational people, especially in the online setting. I think a lot of this is a case of chronically online people not realizing that La Fiction is about real things, and not just having a playground to have fun in. But also, I believe a lot of the people who were doing these bad things were probably too young to grasp mouthwashing. They were driven to the fandom either through Let's Plays or through the jokey attitude a lot of the fanbase had already adopted. On top of this, I do think the light-hearted nature people handled mouthwashing with could be in part a bit of a cope. If you were to engage with the game head-on, I could imagine one getting depressed very quickly, and who really wants that? It's like how people meme about real-world events, like the COVID pandemic, or the fact that we're all getting very old very quickly. It's a way of coping with humor. It's just sometimes that humor isn't entirely needed. But I think maybe the biggest reason that toxicity was able to snowball like this was because social media incentivized hatred. Anger is one of the strongest emotions, and since a platform wants your time, it'll show you more things to keep you angry, so you spend more time on their platform, then they can run more ads and make more money. I'm sure you're all aware of this. And because there were two immediately diametrically opposed groupings within the fandom, it was able to harness this to its fullest extent. The bitterness from both sides just led to a war, and there's a chance that bad actors saw this all going down and decided they wanted to join in to cure a bit of boredom. So I've already spoken about two possible ways in which we can prevent mass implosion within a fanbase already in this video, making it very clear that certain pieces of media require a different approach to what people are typically used to. I.e., for a game as dark and intertwined with heavy real-world topics such as mouthwashing, we should generally steer clear from approaching it the same way you would Undertale or Night in the Woods. Not every fandom needs to be the exact same, with AUs, shipping cultures, fun in-jokes. Some pieces of art need to be respected in a different way. And I don't think this is a pretty big leap for the majority of people on the internet. Take Fear and Hunger, for example. It's another dark game, but somehow it has a very upbeat fanbase, and somehow curated a Tumblr-esque following. As far as I'm aware, nobody's shipping Darth with the cave dwellers after they possibly raped her. At least that's what I took away from that cutscene. People are smart enough to not treat the horribly obscene parts of Fear and Hunger as a light-hearted joke. Not saying that it doesn't happen, I'm sure it does. It just isn't center stage as it was for Mouthwashing. And the second point is that we need to re-examine our language. This shit is having an awful impact on us. If you're talking about death, say death, not unalived. If you're talking about suicide, say suicide and not suicide. If you care more about making money on these topics than you do treating them with respect, then just don't talk about them. And if it's really that big of an issue and you really don't want to say the words but cover the topics, then just censor it. That's what people used to do. I can promise you, if the algorithm is smart enough to pick up on you saying porn, it's smart enough to pick up on you saying corn. All you're doing is devaluing the topic you're discussing. I do think open discussion is paramount to ending toxicity. Instead of spewing vitriol at an artist you dislike, just explain to them your side of the argument. Hope they'll listen and move on. If enough people started doing this, then you would hope things would change. And you might be sitting there saying, well, I don't owe anyone my time to explain to them that why they're doing an incredibly obvious thing is bad. And I guess you'd be fully correct. But if you're not willing to help, then don't be willing to attack someone either. If someone really likes the Jimmy X Anya ship, they make some art without fully understanding the game. They put it online and all they get is, I hate you, you're the worst person ever, rot and die. There's a much higher chance that that person will get on the defensive. They're not being attacked for what they created, but they're being attacked as a person. More likely to dig their heels into the ground because why would I listen to the other side? They already hate me. More likely they'll start blocking out rational arguments as a form of self-preservation and seek out communities that agree with them. Most of the times these communities will be harboring significantly worse views than the person in our scenario. But the pipeline is already in full effect. This isn't going to work for everyone, I'm aware of that. Some people are little shits who will stop at nothing to tear a fandom down. Maybe because their parents didn't give them enough attention, and so they feel the need to rage bait people on the internet. But I genuinely believe if you approach people you disagree with, whose actions you disagree with, from the basis of education and open discussion, we will get a lot more achieved. I really hate this "it's not my job to educate you" shtick that people have been running with recently. If you aren't willing to at least point people in the right direction, then I don't think you really care about trying to solve a problem. You aren't going to change people's minds by showing off how holier than thou you are. This clearly doesn't apply for every case, and the one I'm discussing isn't that deep. You know, fandom culture isn't life or death. And for real-world issues, I don't think this point stands. Like, I don't think every trans person needs to explain, like, whether they're gonna get surgeries or just weird personal shit. But it's such an ego-driven and individualist way of life. Sure, you don't owe anybody anything. Great. Do you want, like, a prize or something? You also don't owe anybody the assurance that you won't drive 10 units over the drinking limit, but you don't do that, do you? I mean, you might, I'm not sure who watches these videos. And people don't owe you the safety of not kicking you in the shins every time they see you, but they don't do that. Do you want to know why you don't drink and drive and why other people don't kick you in the shins? Compassion, care for other people, And if you're finding that the majority of people won't listen to you and you can feel yourself getting bitter and angry, then take a break. Don't engage, touch grass, whatever kids say these days. These aren't insane revelations that I'm having, they're pretty easy conclusions to come to. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you cannot add anything constructive, then don't give your input. Nobody wants to hear your sick burn, no matter how radical it may be. And of course, I don't think the side who is just reacting to other people's wrongdoings is the only side that needs to change. The people who are making these unsanitary ships and intentionally making a mess of the fan base are the ones who should take action much more, though probably won't. Funny how that works out. There was a very simple line that was taught to me and everyone else at school during online safety. Realistically, it was to stop teenage boys from sending people pictures of their genitals. When posting something online, imagine your grandmother would see it. If it doesn't pass the grandma litmus test, then probably keep it to yourself. Do you think your grandma would like to see your AO3 smut of a rapist making out with his captain? Probably not, so best to keep that one to yourself. And I think that's all I have time for today. I really hope you enjoyed watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. I like seeing my numbers go up. I have Unijoy, and you have been entertained.